What if scaling your business wasn't about grinding out more deals, but attracting people to help you scale and grow? Today's Fiv Realty Masterclass, we have the one and only Giannos with Human Eyes, breaking down exactly how we can recruit, retain, and grow and scale through people. Trust me, you're going to want to take notes for this one. Let's jump in.
All right, cool, everyone. Well, thank you for the introduction, Nazar, and I'm stoked to be here today. I'm going to share my screen, so let's get into this. So what my goal is today for everyone, just to kind of give you guys all some context, the way I think about the world is through the lens of data, right? Which I know sounds silly, but the cool thing is data can't lie to you. There's tons and tons and tons of opinions in the world right now about how real estate should be bought and sold, why agents are leaving certain brokerages and moving to others, and all sorts of complexity. What I'm going to run you guys through today is recruiting and kind of the landscape of it going into 2026. And more importantly, how to look at this through the lens of data and not just vibes. To give you guys all some context, I put about 75,000 agents a year through my platforms, through our softwares, right? Which is around like 3 to 4% of the agents in the country go through our platform on an annual basis. I have more data on why agents are leaving certain models, joining other models than probably anyone on the planet, which is really, really cool and gives me the ability to be super detailed with you guys and give you all sorts of good kind of insights with this stuff. So let's start off just kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to quickly give you guys my background in like 30 seconds or less. I hate talking about myself, but I want to set up an idea of like why I'm capable and competent at talking about this stuff. We're going to talk about finding candidates, right? So when it comes down to actually recruiting, producing agents, we're going to be talking about what types of avatars we should be going after, what they're looking for, the pros and cons with all of them, and then obviously sourcing and getting these people across the finish line. How do we actually start conversations? We're going to talk about having conversations with agents that are interested in either joining an organization or a new brokerage or a team individually, whatever it looks like. The unfortunate reality is people dramatically overcomplicate what recruiting funnels look like. When it comes down to it, it's not super complex. It's usually 2 conversations before you make an offer and you're off to the races. If it's longer than that, there's some cons that I'm going to run you through as far as just, we know the average agent talks to 2 to 3 different brokerages before they make a move. If all of a sudden they're going through a 5-step interview process to join you, guess what? Someone else might not have a better value than you. They just might beat you to the punch, right? And get it across the finish line faster. We're going to talk about interviewing specifically. So what types of questions we should be asking agents, number of interviews and best practices there. We'll have time for Q&A at the end, and then we will kind of go from there if that sounds like a plan. So this is me. I used to shave my head. I don't anymore. So that's why no hair in this picture. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Human Eyes. So we're a SaaS platform that helps recruit mortgage companies, real estate companies, and real estate teams recruit, onboard, and manage their employees in one place, right? We put 75,000 candidates a year through our platform. I have tons of really cool data. Tom Ferry is my business partner, so I work really, really closely with Tom and his organization, speak all the time with him on the road, all that cool stuff. In my past life, to give you all some context, I'm not some software nerd in a conference room somewhere that thought, hey, this might be a cool tool for team leaders and brokerage owners. I used it to grow my own team, right? So over the course of 28 months, I recruited a couple hundred agents. We sold like $1 billion in real estate. This was during COVID, so I don't think I'm the coolest guy on the planet. Market conditions had a lot to do with that, I'm sure. But it was really cool and I learned a lot, and that's where this platform was actually born. For those of you on this call that are budding startup founders, I do a couple angel investments every year. So if you've got an idea for a software startup, call me or ping me after we're done. I would love to connect with you and hear about it. And in past life, before any of this even started, I worked at Zillow for 5 years. If you want to throw things at me, this is the time to do it. Boo, right? I'm okay with that. I'm an ex-employee, not a current employee. So that's good. But it taught me a lot about building high-performance sales organizations. And the cool thing now is I know the inside of that business because I've been there, and it's kind of turned me into a little bit of an oracle with this stuff. If you're on social media, this is my Instagram handle at Giannos. So my name, super easy to do. I only post about like growing teams and brokerages and pictures of my dogs. So if you like puppies, definitely follow me. I'm the guy for that. So I want to give you guys just some insights into like state of the market and where this is all going. This is some data from a guy named Mike Del Preti, who puts out a lot of reporting on just all sorts of different data points in the industry and kind of what's happening right now. There's some really interesting trends that are starting to appear, right? And the interesting trend that I want to show you all is that over the last 5, 6, 7 years, there was a pattern, right? And if you notice, when you look at agent count, right, here in terms of growth year over year through 2022, and then you look at this graph down here, which is transaction volume, there is a direct correlation, friends, not a haphazard kind of shady correlation, a direct correlation between agent count, right, and transactions, which I know sounds like, well, Chris, don't hire anybody with a pulse and a real estate license and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not saying to do that. But if you notice here, there's an inflection point that happened. And what you see is a lot of these legacy brokerages that had like complete market dominance over the last 5, 6 years before the market shifted, something happened, right? Their growth in agent count flatlined. The market shifted, rates got a little wonky, and then guess what starts to happen? It starts to inverse. And now all of a sudden, transaction volume is growing for these companies that are focusing on recruiting, right? The reason I share this with you is a lot of team leaders and brokerage owners get stuck in this trap of like paralysis by analysis. We only want to hire perfect agents, right? If there was a way to only hire agents that are doing 10 to 15 million a year in production and we're just rock stars, I would have the world's greatest real estate brokerage on the planet, right? And I would hire all of them and spend all of the money. It's not possible, right? But the good news is what I'm going to walk you through today are these different avatars and all this stuff. Getting recruiting across the finish line and focusing on it, in my opinion, there's not a single higher ROI activity thing you can do outside of training. My thing with growing teams and brokerages, you focus on training, you're going to win no matter what. That's the single highest ROI activity thing you can do, making your agents better. This close second, and when I say close, I mean like right there, is recruiting. And this type of data shows that, right? It's evident and apparent that this is really, really true. The other thing I want to call out quickly is when we look at legacy shops that aren't innovating, right? So what I mean by that is, and again, this is nothing against these companies. This is just data. I have tons of friends at all of these companies and clients at a lot of them too. When you look at brick and mortar legacy brokerages, as far as what their operating expenses have looked like year over year, as revenue and transaction volume has started to dip, these companies have had to pivot, right, in terms of like what they're actually offering. And that has impacted value proposition and all that stuff. But what you notice here is the companies that focused on recruiting and growth, right, as a byproduct, got to ride that wave from a transaction standpoint and haven't had to necessarily cut like operating cost. Dropping operating costs by 22% over the course of a couple of, like this is across 4 quarters, I think, a year. That's not like, oh, stuff that we don't care about. That is directly impacting value to those agents, right? And people will feel that. So knowing that, brokerages that are staying on that cutting edge of innovation right now, cloud-based, looking into additional revenue streams, more models, more tech, all that cool stuff, are the people that are winning. And it's going to become evident and apparent longer over bigger periods of time. So let's talk a little bit about finding agents for our teams or brokerages. Out of curiosity, just so I can kind of get a lay of the land, by a show of in chat, if you guys want to reply in there, are we primarily teams? If so, how many teams do we have? Are we running brokerages? Like, would love to hear a little bit in the chat about your guys' businesses so I can kind of niche this down a little bit. But in terms of agent avatars and different ways to think about this, there's a couple of different avatars. David says broker. Awesome. There's a couple of ways to think about this. There's only a couple of different avatars. And yes, these were made by ChatGPT because it's really cool and easy to make images now and stuff, but they're a little nerdy, so bear with me. When we think about avatars, there's pros and cons for each one of these different groups. New agents, recruiting new agents is the easiest thing on the planet, right? When it comes down to it, like, duh, it's the easiest thing to do. These people, they don't come in with a lot of bad habits, but guess what? They also don't come in with a lot of good habits either. They're like puppies. They're going to pee on the carpet and you got to potty train them and all that cool stuff. Yes, I just called them puppies. But here's the reality. A lot of teams and brokerages that really, really shy away from new agents specifically, the way I want you guys to think about it is like this. That stat that NAR put out recently, 72% of agents didn't sell a house in the last 12 months, right? If all of us as team leaders and brokerage owners are focusing on this niche, right, of people that are in our sweet spot from a production standpoint, do you know how many recruiting calls the average agent gets on a weekly basis? 3.7, right? On average, when you statistically look at it over the course of a year, and that was sampled from 10,000 agents, right? They get 3 or more phone calls on a weekly basis trying to recruit them. When you think about 72% of agents not selling a house in the last 12 months, that finite pool of people that are producing, they're obviously people we should go after. But if we know that there is a direct correlation between growth and agent count, and it's evident and apparent that that is true according to the data, new agents, I'm not saying hire all of them. I've done that before, right? Hired tons and tons and tons of new agents at once. And guess what usually happens? It sucks, right? Your phone is blowing up and all you're doing is answering questions. You're teaching people how to do really dumb things like write contracts or do a home inspection, whatever it is. So knowing that, this should be a part of the avatar we go after. I usually don't recommend more than like 25%, right? When you break it down, 25% of the people that you are going after or having conversations with from a recruiting standpoint should be in that new agent bucket. Not a lot of bad habits, not a lot of good habits, but when you have these people from puppy stage, right, and you get to like train them and raise them and do that, there's usually a pretty significant level of loyalty that you get out of that too, right? Which is cool. And opportunity cost perspective of going out and having to recruit more agents, I would rather retain than recruit any day of the week. It's way, way easier and way more cost effective. The next is the frustrated producer, right? And what I mean by that is most agents, and this is evident and apparent according to MLS data, never get beyond like 7 to 10 transactions a year, right? And why do they not get beyond 7 to 10 transactions a year? Because they're doing everything. They don't have any leverage in their business, right? They're showing houses, doing home inspections, negotiating, cold calling, making contact with new buyers, holding open. They're doing everything. For those of you guys that have been a high producing agent before, you know how that feels, right? That's not fun. That person is frustrated. They're making money, but usually they are a slave to the job. They don't have a business. They have a job, and it is 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, right? And when we think about that person, they're already generating revenue, which is good. They're likely generating enough revenue to survive, but not necessarily thriving yet. When we think about the pros and cons of that type of person, if we're a brokerage or a team that provides systems and back end and leverage, we're going to immediately alleviate a lot of this person's stress and pressures and get that person where maybe they break through to that 15, 20 number, right? But something to consider with that group when you're thinking about what your value proposition is as a team leader or brokerage owner, that group specifically, that is the most targeted group by a large margin. They get more calls than anyone. Those people in the messy middle, and it's usually because they're in a significant amount of pain, right? They're working a lot. They're super stressed out. They're all over the place, but they're already producing revenue, which is really, really, really important for us from a recruiting standpoint. The way I want you guys to start thinking about this, and we'll go through this a little bit further in the presentation, there's this number sequence that I look at with any team or brokerage I work with. In SaaS and software, for those of you guys that might have a SaaS background, we call it like an LTV to CAC ratio, right? It's a financial term for lifetime value to cost to acquire a customer. And you get this magic number out of it. If you're not spending enough, that number's super high and people are like, hey, you could be spending more money on customer acquisition, blank, blank, and blank. If it's too low, you have too high of churn and your business is not in good shape, right? There's a sweet spot. On the team and brokerage side, it's a LTV over what I call the cost to acquire an agent, right? How much money are we actually spending from a resources, salaries, ads perspective to actually get across the finish line? With this middle avatar, they're significantly more expensive to grab those people from an actual cost perspective because there is so much competition. Knowing that that person is getting 3 to 4 phone calls every single week and everyone is proactively targeting them, there's usually a little bit of friction and the cost to acquire these people is a little bit higher. I know me saying cost to acquire someone sounds very capitalist, right? Just bear with me. We're not actually acquiring them, obviously, but you guys get the drift. And then lastly, we've got these killers, right? Top producing agents. Here's what I want you guys to all think about. There's an epidemic with teams and brokerages right now that I encounter a lot, which is we have this idea in our head of what type of avatar we want to actually recruit, right? And a lot of people would love to hire someone that's selling 25 plus houses a year. The question you have to ask yourself is, does my value proposition line up with the avatar that I'm looking to hire wants, needs, and pains, right? And if it does, then you should have no problem recruiting that person, It's just a numbers game at that point. But if you've been spinning your wheels a little bit from a recruiting perspective and you're not able to make significant progress forward, or if your numbers don't look very good, you're not recruiting at least 15 to 20% of the conversations you have, then I would challenge you that your value proposition might not line up with the avatar that you're actually looking for. These top producing agents, it's more of a relationship than anything. I can't tell you guys, and this is going to be probably like music to some of your guys' ears on this call, I can't tell you how many high producing agents I've tried to recruit before that their single biggest reason for not wanting to leave their team or brokerage had nothing to do with money, right? What do we think it had something to do with? Personal relationship with the broker. They didn't want to let down the manager or let down the broker that they've been friends with for 10 or 15 years. That's a slow grind. You don't run ads and then recruit agents that are selling 25 or 30 houses a year. That's not how it works, right? It's a slow grind. It's relationship based and it takes time. What we as team leaders and brokerage owners need to think about, you can't control someone else's motivation levels. You can try and persuade them, but you're not going to control their motivation levels at the end of the day. What you do control is the frequency at which you talk to these people, right? Whether it's calls or text messages or emails or ads you're hitting them with. What we can't control is the extrinsic stuff behind the scene. People have peaks and valleys and motivations based on extrinsic events. If you have a conversation, Nazar calls an agent, has a great conversation, they're not ready to move yet, and then 3 weeks later they get in a fight with their broker. Something doesn't work out, right? The commission plan changes or something, and then Nazar, coincidentally, because he stays in touch, calls him 24 hours later, guess what happens? You've now got an extrinsic event, right, that has motivation. You've connected with that person at the right time. That's how that stuff happens. My advice to most people on this call, the top producers, if you're going to build your brokerage out of those people, awesome. Get ready to grow slow, right? And not in a bad way. That is a business plan that some people follow. If it were me, usually what the breakup looks like here is 25% new agents, 50% this messy middle, and 25% the top producing folks is the usual split. Or you could focus on the first two or the last two. It doesn't really matter. But from a speed and balancing revenue perspective, it's usually 25, 50, 25, right? Is how you want to split your time. Okay. So before we continue, I want to just drill into this real quick. I would ask you guys to think about, as we go through this, what is your avatar that you're focusing on? And the second question that I want you to think about before we continue is, does your value proposition match the wants and needs of your ideal avatar? And the really simple way to realize and think about, is this happening, is two things. One, based on what your avatar is now, are people consistently and on a regular basis reaching out to you, asking to join your team or brokerage that meet your avatar? If the answer is yes, then fantastic, it lines up. If the answer is, Chris, it never happens, then one of two things is true. Either the brokerage value proposition or team value proposition you have doesn't align with what that group actually wants, or you're doing a poor job at communicating it and no one actually knows what it is, right? That's the two-pronged thing. The other part of it is, of the conversations that you do have, right? General recruiting conversion rate, if you have 10 conversations, actual full presentations about what your team or brokerage does, 20% of the time you should get someone across the finish line, meaning for every 10 you have, you should put 2 across the board. If that is not happening, then same concept. Your value proposition might not match what your ideal agent avatar wants, or you're not doing a good job at explaining it, right? And the sales process is a little wonky, and that's something that can be fixed, is the good news. So just kind of think about that before we continue and internalize it a little bit. So let's talk about sourcing candidates. What I mean by sourcing candidates is, unfortunately, the real estate business is weird. It's not like a W-2 position where you post a job ad and you get 500 applicants in 3 days, right? This is a sales process at the simplest of terms. Recruiting producing agents is not, it's not recruiting. It's like, it is sales. It's not kind of sales. It is 100% a sales funnel is the way to think about it. And the people that do it really, really, really well look at it like that from the beginning. You have a couple of different ways to source candidates. You have job boards, right? So Indeed, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Monster.com, all of these places. Job boards are cool for usually, right, that initial avatar we talked about. No producing agent, for the most part, is going on Glassdoor and typing in real estate agent jobs, right? It's usually a couple of different avatars in that initial bucket for job boards. It's new agents new to the market agents, meaning people that are relocating from other places, or agents that have the real estate disease. I should probably come up with a better name than that, but I say that to get people's ears to perk up. The real estate disease is this thing that agents develop where when their production slips, they don't look in the mirror and say, oh my gosh, Nazar, what am I doing wrong? Maybe I should work harder or make more phone calls, right? They look in the mirror and say, oh my gosh, my production has slipped. This is my broker's fault. I should move brokerages, right? It's a disease that people develop. It's true, and it happens over and over and over again. Those people are like habitual brokerage or team switcherers, right? And those are the types of people that usually come through job boards. So 25% of what we're looking for should come through platforms like that. It's inexpensive to run ads. It's consistent. And those people are like bottom of the funnel. They're on a website looking for a proactive role, right? You can have conversations and get those people across the finish line reactively easy. The next is cold calling. For those of you guys that have never cold called from a recruiting standpoint before, at the end of the session, I'm going to give you guys like a pack of some scripts and social ads and stuff that you guys can use. The script in there I have is called the Are You Open-Minded script, right? We're running a recruiting challenge right now with a couple hundred team leaders and brokerage owners. The average number of calls right now using that script to set a recruiting appointment is 12. Using that script, meaning for every 12 phone calls they are making, they are setting one recruiting appointment with producing agents, right? Cold calling works, guys. It works really, really well. Cold calling with the traditional, hey, this is Bob calling from ABC Realty. Oh, there's actually a Bob on this call. Bob, I'm not making fun of you, I promise. I normally use that name. This is Bob calling from ABC Realty. We're super impressed with your production. We'd love to sit down and chat about how we could help you over coffee or something. Like that is the call agents are used to getting, right? When you call from a different perspective using scripts that are designed to be psychologically enhancing and get people actually thinking about things, it works really well. There's not many things you can do where you can make 12 phone calls and get to the outcome you want, right? The way to think about it, if we know that the average conversion rate is 20%, if your value prop matches your avatar, and you can make 12 phone calls to set an appointment, right? If we make 120 phone calls, right? For the most part, we're going to set 10 appointments. If we make 10 appointments, we're going to hire 2 people. It's that simple. The key is just doing it consistently, and people don't do that, unfortunately. The next is cold email. For those of you that, if it were me and I was just getting started from like a recruiting perspective, cold email takes time. It's the same way like sending newsletters doesn't generate buyer and seller leads like right out of the gate. It's a slow drip and takes time, but it works and it's value-based, and over time it will lead to the outcomes you want. You have organic, social, and paid social. This is one of the downloads that I'm going to give you guys today, is some actual examples of templates you can use for social for recruiting purposes. Paid social is by far my favorite way to recruit agents. Right? In most states using paid social ads, you can recruit an agent for around $300 total all in, including cost of recruiter and including cost of ad, right? Ad spend and recruiter, it's around $300. The way to think about it is the average producing agent, right? If you have an agent for your team or brokerage that's on a 70-30 split or an 80-20 split, if they're producing, you're going to make your money back quick. One transaction covers your cost to acquire them, right? When you look at your LTV and how long an average agent stands for you, it's usually pretty significant. But with paid social, and I'm going to give you guys some examples of this, you can recruit an agent for around $300, which is like the greatest use of cash on the planet. It's insane. And then lastly, you've got like networking, right? Networking's cool. It makes sense. It's a slow burn. If it were me and I was focusing on agent attraction, networking's cool to a certain extent, but like you have to be out in the field shaking hands and kissing babies. And I don't know about you guys, I'm good at that for like a day at a time. And then my social battery's drained and I'm like, I'm over that. I don't want to do that consistently. But the way I would be thinking about this, for those of you that are focused on recruiting, and it's a big part of your game plan for 2026, the way I want you to think about all this stuff is recruiting is just like generating listings. If an agent came to you that was at your team or brokerage right now and said, Chris, I want to sign 10 listings next year, you wouldn't just tell them to hold open houses. You wouldn't just tell them to door knock or circle prospect or run ads or whatever. You would say, hey, you should pick a couple of lead pillars and do the same thing. That is what recruiting and agent attraction is at scale. The single best approach isn't one thing, right? It's do a couple of them and do them consistently at like maintainable levels. The recruiting challenge I'm doing right now with some of our teams, I am making 25 phone calls 3 days a week. That's it, right? When you start doing 50, 100, you burn yourself out. You get told to kick rocks too many times. It's not fun, right? Do something that is consistent and sustainable. And if it were me and I was going to pick, hey, Chris, I want to recruit 10 agents in the next 3 or 4 months, I would pick a couple of different things on here. I would have some job board stuff going no matter what, right? Cross Indeed probably is your best bet, unless you're in a market where like LinkedIn or ZipRecruiter is bigger. You don't have to spend a significant amount of money to do it. I would focus on making 25 outbound phone calls per day, at least 3 days a week, using the script I'm going to give you. And I would have some paid social ads running. If you do those 3 things, it's basically impossible to not recruit agents, right? Unless you have no value proposition and you have unrealistic expectations of what you're looking for in agents, right? But doing those 3 things, not a significant amount of money that needs to be spent, not a significant time investment from a capacity perspective, and they all work together. The way to think about it is cold calling isn't cold calling if you have an agent that got served a social ad 15 minutes before that, right? Or an hour before that, or a day before that. If they don't know, like, and trust your brand already, and they get hit with a social ad, and then 2 days later, 3 days later, they get a phone call from you, there's familiarity. And guess what? Your cold call just got a little warmer. So all of this stuff, it's a flywheel. It works together, and it's beautiful when it works out, because then you don't have to recruit agents anymore. The attraction starts where people are coming to you and you're growing organically, which is like organic growth. There's nothing better than it, but it takes time, and you get the machine started, that flywheel. You insert money, the flywheel starts spinning, and then it coughs out organic agents eventually. It's beautiful. I love it. It's like a symphony. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is the approach with these people. When it comes down to it, agents make moves for 4 things, and 4 things only consciously. So don't think about yourself. I'm going to take a drink of water real quick. My throat is killing me. I think I'm getting sick. Okay, that's better. So how we got this data, to give you all some context, we put like 70,000 agents a year through our platform. I get surveys back on tons and tons and tons of agents. We ask them, why are you moving? Why are you leaving your current brokerage or team? What's the reasoning? There's 4 things that people consciously, when we did a data science study of this, and actually worked with a data scientist to help us come out of this, the number one thing, right, in 2023, the last time I actually ran this data, out of the 32,000 agents we pulled that year, the number one thing people said, I am moving because of blank. It was leads. Not, hey, I have to join a brokerage that gives me expensive Zillow leads, or is on Flex, or gives me market VIP leads with realtor.com. That's not what I mean by leads. People, agents, this single biggest motivator for them is not money, right? Regardless of what you hear, they're lying to you. They want to get close to people that are going to help them get closer to the transaction. Knowing that 72% of agents didn't sell a house last year, these people are getting eaten alive, right? It's brutal. If we have a way that we can tell agents, we're going to get you closer to the transaction, and here's how. Your lead value proposition, when we talk about interviewing, it could be you teach people how to hold open houses better than anyone. It could be you teach people how to circle prospect better than anyone, right? Whatever the thing is, your driver from a value prop perspective, we're going to teach you how to do more deals, is what this means, right? It doesn't matter how you do that. You could give them leads, you could teach them to circle prospect or hold open houses or door knock or whatever it is, but that is the number one drivers. People want to join a team or brokerage that's going to help them get closer to the transaction. The next thing is training. And when I say it was a close second, it was a really close second. But here's what I want to highlight for everyone. When brokerages or teams, when you say training is a part of your value proposition, what agents are seeking right now is tactical sales training, right? Bringing a title rep to talk about prelims that brings stale bagels and saying, hey, training, right? You're checking a box. Like, I get it. Training's tough. We want to find ways to like mitigate and double dip our time and have other people. I get it. That play, though, over and over and over again is going to like drive people away. They want tactical sales training, how to conduct buyer consultations better, how to do listing presentations better, how to door knock, how to circle prospect, how to have a conversation with a buyer that during the home inspection when there's a laundry list of crap and the deal's about to explode. There are so many things that you can train on, but the key is tactical, right? Not just checking a box to say we have training. Support. When it comes down to it, getting these people to feel it, it's really, really, really important right? When it comes down to it, what I actually mean by support is different than telling it someone, oh, we've got a great back office and blank, blank, and blank. If it was me and I was trying to convey my value proposition, the single biggest thing I want people to understand is that my team or brokerage, my goal is to keep you selling real estate, not doing paperwork, right? And we have leverage by way of transaction coordinator, listing coordinator, whatever that looks like. This is becoming more and more apparent. And when you think about producing agents, that messy middle that we talked about, where 50% of our hires are should be coming from, or even that top producing agent, the pain points those people have are usually not around lead generation, right? They're usually not around, they're not making enough money, right? It's usually a support thing. They don't have any leverage in their business. When you explain what support means, and I'm going to get into this as we go through the interviewing process, you have to explain the how, not the what, right? Telling someone that we have great support, it's like, use your imagination. I'm too lazy to explain it to you, right? Versus explaining what the actual benefit is and how they're going to feel it. That's the difference maker. And we're going to go through that. And then lastly, compensation, right? That was at the bottom of the totem pole. That was the fourth biggest driver of behavior change, was comp, right? It goes without saying that agents like to keep as much of their commission as possible. My favorite thing on the planet, and the way I describe this to all of my team and brokerage clients I work with on a personal basis, the best comp plan is one that's profitable that agents will buy, right? I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. The best comp plan is the one that is profitable for the brokerage first and enough for agents to buy it, right? That's how you know. If you're not the gauge here of trying to figure out if this is actually good and your comp plan is where it should be, if you're recruiting 20% of every agent that you talk to from joining you perspective, your comp plan's great, right? If you're not, and the reason they're not joining you is because of comp, you might need to take a look at that. Cool? Okay. Now here's the weird part. And this is the part that usually gets people's brains going a little bit. When we think about consciously and subconsciously, agents are joining for blank, blank, and blank reasons. They're also joining for two other reasons that are subconscious, and you can't use these as value propositions because they're intangible. The first is leadership, right? And what I mean by that is, if I know this for a fact, and I'm sure a lot of you guys on this call have experienced this, when I've been trying to recruit producing agents that are kind of big shots, usually the reason they don't want to leave the team or brokerage they're at is because they have a personal relationship with the broker or sales manager or whoever it is, and they don't want to let that person down. If we can say that a reason for agents joining or leaving or coming to a new team or brokerage is leadership is one of the subconscious things, it's evident and apparent as to why people don't move for that reason. They have such a connection to someone that they do not want to leave because they're more worried about hurting that person's feelings than actually making more money, right? It's difficult to tell someone in an interview that you just met, hey, you should join me because I'm a great leader. They have to feel it. They have to experience it. And they're not going to get that in a 30-minute interview with you. They get that by joining the team or brokerage. But that's your retention play. You being a strong leader and leading from the front, that's how you win at the biggest of levels. And then obviously culture. I talk to dozens and dozens and dozens of team leaders a week at this point, or brokerage owners a week. And I always ask about their value prop. And usually the first thing out of their mouth is culture. That is not a value proposition that you can recruit to, right? It's intangible. People cannot, again, they're not going to join you because of the culture. They have to experience and feel it. And there's ways you can convey that in an interview. But knowing that that is not a primary driver of catalyst of behavior change, you have to be really intentional with not leading with that, because it's not something that's going to get the agents all like whoop-de-doo about. Cool? All right. So I want to walk you guys through a couple of examples, and then we'll get into the interview stuff. These are cold outreach strategies, and this will be in the content download pack I give you guys at the end of this. If you're one of those people that says, Chris, I really, really, really don't like cold calling, this script on the left that will be in this download folder I'm going to give you guys, this is a script that I have been sending LinkedIn DMs with for like 6 or 7 years at this point. And I give it to all of our customers because it works. You can go on LinkedIn and you can search for agents in your marketplace. It's the easiest tool on the planet to do it with. You can send out connection requests and you can send this message either on LinkedIn or Facebook, if you want. This message at scale across thousands and thousands and thousands of sends has a 23% response rate, right? That is unheard of with cold outreach. It works really, really, really well. to give you guys some context, for those of you guys that know Jimmy Mackin at Listing Leads, right? Jimmy Mackin and I polished this thing again like 6 months ago. It is deadly. You don't have to make any cold calls, right? You could send out 20 or 30 of these messages a day and set 2 or 3 appointments. It's game over. It is that easy, friends, right? The second thing on here is a script that I'll give you guys that'll be in this download. But again, the idea here is like, I think agents are so used to someone calling and kind of being vague and not really direct about why they're calling. I like scripts that are more like hit them over the head with a frying pan. And what I mean by that is call them, letting them know why you're calling, right? I'm actively trying to recruit you is basically the theme you want to think about with this, just because that vaguity is what leads people to have that slimy kind of gross feeling. So this will be in the content download that I give you guys. Couple of different ad examples, right? So job board stuff, there will be a bunch of examples in there. I'll send you guys some examples of that so you have it if you do want to post on LinkedIn or Indeed or ZipRecruiter or one of those portals. And then obviously social ads, right? This is a good friend of mine, client of mine that runs a big brokerage in San Antonio, Texas. His name's Levi Rogers. That photo, it's a little blurry because I clipped it from like a smaller photo and I'm on a big screen right now. That picture is generating leads and has been for like, I don't know, a year and a half at like $10 a pop, right? It's not super creative. It's not over the top. It's a scroll stopper. People are like, why is that guy holding money? What is that? Right? That type of creative works really, really, really well. And this will be in the content download I give you guys. So the common thread in all of this, you guys, with all of these different scripts and postings and copy and ad creatives and all this stuff, the mistake that team leaders and brokerage owners make is really, really simple. Your people are not coming to work for you. Your agents are your product now, right? They're your customer. Your brokerage is your product. When it comes down to it, you need to tell agents a story of how they're going to win with you, not what you give them. Right? I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example when we get to the interview. Actually, that's where that's at. So let's talk a little bit about interviewing agents specifically and like best practices here. There's a couple of things I want you all to think about from a recruiting standpoint before you actually even start conducting interviews. The first is agents are jaded. So think about it this way. There are 2.1 million licensed agents, I think is the last time I checked the number, right? 72% of them have not sold a house in the last 12 months. And even worse, 85% of them will fail over the course of 5 years. This industry is brutal. Why does that happen? It doesn't happen because people suck and they're just terrible at business people. It happens because you pass a 150 question multiple choice vocabulary test and they give you a license to go sell a $10 million house. Right? You don't know how to write a contract. You know how many square feet are in an acre, but you don't know how to conduct a listing presentation. You don't know how to do anything, right? Knowing that, most agents, by the time you talk to them, are not having a great time. They've gotten their butt kicked, right? The first couple of teams or brokerages they were at, guess what? They lied through their teeth to them. The team said, oh, we have blank, blank, and blank, and all this value, and everything's great. And guess what? They lied. And they are jaded. They are, I look at it through the lens of like, these people are like pound puppies. They're jaded. They're not super trained. They don't know what's going on and they're scared above all else. Knowing that before you go into interviews is going to make you way more effective. Agents 100% of the time will go path of least resistance. You have to assume that every agent you talk to from a recruiting perspective is talking to you and 2 other brokerages at the same time. That's the statistic. They talk to 3 on average before they make a move. If you have 4 or 5 interview steps and your competitor has 2, who do you think's going to win more? Your competitor, right? They're going to get people through the funnel faster. I'm not saying hire everybody with a pulse and a real estate license, compromise your morals and just turn and burn. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying you have to figure out how to be competitive, because here's the thing to remember. These people, if they're talking to 2 other brokerages or teams most of the time, do we think, and you guys who have been at other brokerages and had conversations and stuff and moved before, does the team or brokerage you're interviewing with always tell you the truth? No. Most of the time, these teams, like, I don't do it. I still get calls from recruiters, right? And kind of like entertain them once in a while. Most of these teams have a recruiter that just lies through they'll tell the agent whatever they want to hear to get them across the finish line. Some of these brokerages have recruiting quotas where like their team leaders have to recruit 10 to 15 agents a month every month. They will tell people whatever they have to do to get them to sign. Knowing that you're competing with speed and unethical practices, you have to be really intentional, right? These interviews are designed to be conversations, not interrogations. The mistake that I see most teams and brokerages make is they have a list of 20 questions they ask during an interview. They don't explain their value proposition, and that's it. That is not an interview, friends. That's an interrogation, and that's not going to get agents to actually come work for you. Interviews at the end of the day are persuasive in nature, right? This one's important. For those of you guys that have some leverage in your business and have like a support staff in any way, shape, or form, the worst thing that you can do is spend money on ads to generate recruiting at-bats and have like an ops person doing your interviews. It's the single worst thing on the planet to do. They light them on fire, right? A lot of the time, ops people are used to dealing with agent BS. A lot of the time internally, when they get on the phone with agents, do we think they're excited to talk to them? No, they're violent. And all they look at it through is the little lens of how big of a pain in the butt is this person going to be for me? Right? It's very, very intentional. So at the end of the day, these conversations are persuasive in nature. Okay. The initial interview, the way I want you to think about it, if you were going to take my advice and say, hey, Chris, I'm going to do exactly what you share with me to a T because I want to crush recruiting. Your interview process should be 2 steps and 2 steps only, right? Not 5, not 4, not 3, 2. An initial interview where you get talk on the phone with someone for 15 to 20 minutes and a face-to-face interview that lasts an hour. That's it. By the end of that conversation, you should either be making that agent an offer or doing the kind of easy way out, which I'll walk you guys through. If you don't want to make them an offer, I'll teach you how to cheat and make that conversation really, really easy to do. But the purpose of that initial interview is simple. We call it the 3 C's, right? It's a 20-minute conversation. My goal on that call is nothing else other than to qualify to culture, character, and coachability, my 3 non-negotiables for every agent that I've ever hired. The only times I have ever compromised on that, it has come back to bite me in the butt bad, right? Where I compromised on one of them. Hired a top producer that was a good character and culture fit, but wasn't coachable, right? Came back to bite me in the butt. Made me lots of money, but came back to bite me in the butt, right? An agent that I compromised a little bit on from like a character perspective because they were a top producer, for sure came to bite me in the butt, right? Culture, character, and coachability should be the 3 things that you look for no matter what. The second thing you're doing on that initial call, and I'm going to give you guys this script in that download pack so you all have access to it, is give them a high value prop pitch. I want them to understand in 10 minutes, right, the tail end of the conversation, why they should come meet with you face to face, right? If all you do is interrogate them for 20 minutes and then try and close for a face-to-face interview, they're not going to want to come meet with you. You got to give them enough to get them excited. Right? And that high level value prop pitch is explaining the how, not the what. And I'll walk you guys through that. Right? The initial interview, I'm going to give you guys a full copy of this, right? But there's basically a couple of different chunks in it. You intro, you set an agenda, you explain what it means, right, to have leads, training, and support on your team, and then you qualify and close. And I'll give you guys this script. Don't worry about reading this right now. But the idea is 20, 25-minute long conversation max. The whole idea is to just rock and roll and get face-to-face with that person if you want to. So here's how I would get into practice with that script. And again, I'm going to give it to you guys. It's a little too long to cover like in detail on a single call like this. Here's what I would do if I were you. I don't know about you guys. I worked at, once upon a time, and this story comes full circle, I started working at Zillow.com when I was 19 years old. Right. I don't know why they hired me. I was a massive liability at that point in my life, but they hired me. Right. And the first couple of days I was in training, I'd never done phone sales before. They gave us a script and I was making cold calls and reading this script and I sounded like a moron. Right. And my boss at the time, who I'm still good friends with to this day, is the guy that hired me. His name's John Bowler. John said, hey, Chris, take that script home tonight and I want you to grab a pen and a piece of paper and I want you to write it out in your own words. Keep the structure the same. But I want you to write it out in your own words and then come back tomorrow. And guess what happened the next day? I made my first sale like 4 hours after getting on the phone, right? We were slanging Zillow zip codes. I probably cold called some of you guys on this call at one point, once upon a time when I was a young punk, right? The point I'm trying to get to is if you wanted to really crush that script and make it your own, take my advice. I know it sounds tedious and we're not used to like writing things anymore because of cell phones and all this crap. Take the script I'm going to give you and write it out by hand and make it your own. And guess what happens? It will sound so much better. That's how you get into practice with this stuff, is doing something different to get something different. Okay. So common thread in all of this, when it comes time to interview agents and actually have conversations, you need to tell a story of how an agent wins with you, not what you give them. And I'm going to give you an example because I know that sounds vague. So I want to show you an example. I have listened to thousands and thousands of hours of recruiting calls at this point. In Humanize specifically, we have recorded phone call functionality. So I have a lot of data on recruiting calls that are happening all over the country at any given point in time. There's two ways to explain value with this, and I'll give you an example. A lot of our customers participate in Zillow's Flex program, right? Which in my opinion is the single fastest way to grow a repeat book of business on the planet, by far, bar none. That's a different story for a different day. If you go to an agent during a recruiting conversation and say, hey, Mr. Agent, I have a Zillow Flex account, right? And our agents get Zillow Flex leads and it's awesome. And yeah, you get a couple of them every month. And as long as you're converting, we'll give you more of them. Do most agents understand what the hell that actually means? No. Where do most agents form their opinions? From personal experience. The second you are trying to use Zillow as a value prop, for example, they're thinking about the time in 2013 when Chris Giannos, when he was 19 years old, cold called him and sold him a zip code for $150 a month. They're thinking about all the crappy high funnel leads that they got through that, and they didn't convert anything and they wasted $500 a month and it was a complete waste of time. That's what they're thinking about, right? They're drawing it from their own personal experience. You want to explain Zillow the right way, you say something like this. So, hey, Nazar, we're what's called a Zillow Flex team. I'm sure you've obviously heard of Zillow, but the way this thing works is pretty cool. We've been trusted. We're a handful of people now in our marketplace. There's not very many of them, but we're one of the few that's been hand selected by Zillow to not just represent them, but to represent their brand and customers here at a local level. And the way it works is if I'm a consumer and I go on Zillow and type in 92801, right, in Long Beach, and I click on a home that's currently for sale, I can select a specific day and time that I want to see that house. I can look at 100 houses before I actually get here, right? But I want to see that house. I select a specific date and time that I want to see it. And then I click submit. And at that point, an agent's phone on our team, their phone rings. And on the other end of that phone is a buyer who wants to see a specific house at a specific time, right? It's pretty hard to screw that kind of lead up, right, Nazar? You know, you explained that the right way when the agent goes, oh, I didn't know that's how that worked. And you can do that with any lead source. So let's say you're not on Zillow Flex. Let's say you have a pay-per-click campaign going through Ylopa or something, right? Explain it the same way. A consumer goes online, they look at 500 houses before they find the one, right? And then they submit an inquiry finally, and your phone rings with that person's name, phone number, and email. All you have to do is call them, right? You can explain it the same way every time, but I want you to think about when you're explaining your value proposition, not what you give them, how what you give them will help them win. And you can do that with leads, training, support, compensation, revenue share, whatever your value is. You need to give them specifics and tell stories, right? The best recruiters are really, really, really good storytellers. And that's in the scripting that I'm going to give you. The difference between those two things is effectiveness. Right? You can be great at explaining what you actually provide, but really shitty explaining how it actually helps them. And that's the difference between a good recruiter and a really, really bad one. Okay. So I've got something for everyone that's on this call, right? I was talking with Nazar prior to this. We have a platform that's got tons and tons and tons of all this stuff in it. I'm going to send you guys a free download no matter what with a bunch of content after we get off. I'll make sure Nazar has that. But if you want more on recruiting content, we have masterminds that happen, group coaching sessions. This is a platform we recently launched. It's called RAW, so recruitandretainagents.com. I'm going to put a link to the chat for those of you guys that are really focused on this stuff that you can get a 7-day free trial. And if you use this code, we love 5, it brings the monthly cost of it down after the free trial to like $69 a month, which is basically free if you ask me. So that code that we love 5 will give you that discount after the 7-day free trial. So if you want to check it out, you're more than welcome to. Okay, that's all I have on that. There's the code. That's great. Now we have time for some Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, now is the time. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can just wrap a little bit. Everyone's like, Chris, that was a lot. You never shut up for a full hour. Questions, thoughts, comments?
I'm an agent that is not a team leader. I am not a broker, but I want to recruit.
Yep.
And so, how would that change my strategy?
So like trying to grow like a downline or an organization.
Yeah, we don't call them downlines, but yes.
Okay.
If,
Organization.
yes, if you're trying to grow, the influence that you have, how do we do that without, saying I've got Zillow Flex that you can
Yeah.
have?
I would, if it were me and I was a solo agent that was trying to do that, I would be storytelling on the internet at all times, right? The way I would be thinking about that is agents join organizations like that for a sense of community, right? For bigger, better opportunities. They think they're going to do better and sell more real estate by being a part of that organization. If you want agents to be attracted to your organization as a solo agent, you got to give them reasons to be. You got to tell them reasons why. I'm not saying go online and start making Facebook posts like, hey, if you want to join my organization, here's what I provide in blank, blank, and blank. Start sharing wins. As far as like, if it were me, for example, a win I got as a byproduct of being at blank brokerage, that's the kind of stories you want to start to do, right? I can show you guys some examples, and that is some of the content that's in Raw specifically for growing organizations like that. But I'll show you guys some examples. When it comes time for social media, I think the trap that people fall into, and I'll kind of show you guys what this looks like. The trap that people fall into is they feel like they have to do like really well polished, high edited, high production quality stuff to get to the outcome they want. If you scroll through my social, right, half this stuff is just so stupid, it's not even funny, but I'll like show you guys an example. When I'm trying to get the end result that I want, so I'll show you an example that worked really, really well recently. I post a lot, so bear with me. Okay, so something about building a personal brand, and I'll show you guys this like exact example. Building a personal brand, right, is something all of us on this call should be trying to do because it's really, really useful when you're trying to actually get end users to buy something from you, or in this case, join your organization, right? Building some sort of emotional like connection with people, it's difficult to do that in group settings unless you're a good storyteller, right? You want people to feel connected to you, and you can do that very deliberately and intentionally. This is an actual picture of me. I work with a performance coach. Her name is Erin. She's terrifying, right? She's 5'3" and worked primarily with like special forces people in the military. And she's the coach that like keeps me in the zone from an executive standpoint. She's terrifying. And like we flip a coin that in my sessions, she either like completely kicks my ass and I cry, or like they're really, really strong and lots of work is done. I was like, I was like sitting there after the call, wiping tears off my face because she kicked my ass so bad. I was like, I'm going to take a picture of this and tell a story about it, right? Because it'll probably resonate with people. So I snapped a picture. I'm literally sitting in the same chair right now. And I wrote this post about like, hey, growth is uncomfortable, right? And like when it comes down to it, if it wasn't a solid coaching session, if you didn't cry, or like cracking jokes like this, the amount of messages, DMs that I got from people saying like, hey, thank you for posting that. That is so awesome. Thank you for being vulnerable and blah, blah, blah. If people were DMing me after that, resonating with me, do we think I impacted those people at an emotional level? I didn't do this to be like a manipulative psychopath. That's not the intention. I actually had a goal of sharing it as well. Like I want other people to like experience things like this, but it's the same concept with growing an organization. You don't have to like do super high polish edited content, right? Like there's all sorts of examples in here of me like, let me find another, like this is stupid, right? But there's a call to action in this caption, right? If recruiting agents feels harder than it should, read this. I tell a story, right? The call to action on here was getting access to a podcast I did with the Follow Up Boss people, right? A ton of people commented on this thing wanting to download it, right? You guys can all do the same thing. And the way I would be thinking about it is if I was trying to attract agents to my organization, start telling stories on the internet, just create some content pillars, right? And what I mean by that is a difficult transaction you just closed. Here's a couple of ideas for you all. A difficult transaction that you just closed that because of the brokerage or team you're at made it easier to do, right? A customer that you just closed that was a company provided lead that got you across the finish line. A situation you found yourself in recently where you were able to fall back on your broker for support, and that's not something that's super common. You got to communicate when it comes down to it, like things that are happening in your life and in your business that other people are going to read and go, ooh, that's interesting, right? That's how you do that type of stuff. Team at Providence said, how are you conveying leadership and culture in an interview without saying we are a great culture or I'm a great leader? That's a great question. the culture stuff is really simple. I would be explaining about like what your social calendar looks like outside of training and stuff, right? So the way I would convey that is, hey, so how I used to convey it. Hey, so once a month we do a happy hour no matter what. There's no agenda, there's no training attached to it. I bring in a taco guy and a bartender and we all hang out for 45 minutes, an hour after work and eat good food and share war stories and vibe and stuff. And beyond that, on a quarterly basis, we volunteer at a charity together. There's a soup kitchen in Santa Ana that you can volunteer at. And as a group, we try and go in there and do that. It's good to give back to the community, one. And two, it feels good to do things for people, other people that are good as a group too. So like the way I would think about it, whoever asked that, is sharing what your social calendar looks like outside of training and recruiting and stuff is a really good way to give people a peek behind the curtain, so to speak. Leadership's completely different. You can't tell someone I'm a good leader, like come work for me. Usually what I like to do, and this sounds kind of like, it's like a Jedi mind trick almost. I start to like proactively kind of try and poke holes in the boat of other people that are going to be interviewing that person. And what I mean by that is telling people things like, hey, so I interview tons and tons and tons of agents every week. And the biggest complaints that I usually hear from them are blank, blank, and blank, right? They're on the finish line. They need to get a deal done. They can't get the broker to pick up the phone, right? Or the broker told them there was going to be tons and tons and tons of leads and there's no leads for them and it sucks and blah, 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 blah. But finding ways to like proactively call out what we know pain points are and how they're different here is a really strong way to do that. So that's pretty much it. I appreciate everyone's time today. Again, if you all want to connect or anything, I'll put my Instagram handle in the chat again. Feel free to follow me or shoot me a DM or anything. And then Nazar, I'll send you over all this content and stuff so you guys can get it out to the attendees and then we can kind of go from there.
I love it.
Cool.
Chris, thank you so much for all the information. I think it's interesting that, no matter where you are in the recruiting process, if that's your full-time thing or if you just want to casually do it.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is being strategic. And some of my takeaways that I had is, no matter who you are, people always are going to want community. They're going to want support. They're going to want the training. They're going to want leads, no matter how that's broken down. And sometimes we don't realize what we have because we, granted. And if you realize that what you have isn't something that you take it for granted, but other people don't have it, right? If you drink, something fancy every single day, it becomes your natural.
Yeah.
Right. And you realize other people don't have that fancy drink every single day. So you can dissect that very, very easily and say, yeah, well, of course we have that. That's just normal. Well, you're not normal for other people.
No, I interact with a variety of different teams, brokerages, and models and stuff. Most brokerages that I have experience with, like, as you guys can imagine, some of these like legacy shops that aren't really on the cutting edge of innovation, they don't really do a whole lot, right? Which is a different story for a different day. But I agree, Nazar, it's all about perspective, right? Recognizing that what we have sometimes is different than what we think we have, right? So cool, guys. I'm going to bounce to my next call. I appreciate the time. Feel free to reach out. Nazar, I'll send you all this content download stuff.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Chris.